Good morning. This is Jamie Green. I'm having some technical issues here, but I am determined to get this message out to you today. It's been a minute since I've done the A.M.C response, which is intended to be my weekly commentary for a mother's cry on issues that are affecting us in our community and even nationwide. And from a mother's viewpoint, a grandmother, auntie, whatever the case may be. But it impacts our communities and especially our children. And so I've attempted to do this. This is my third time this morning, and I'm having some technical issues. But today I want to talk to you about. I want to address something that really disturbs me. Um, and that is the excessive use of psychiatric emergency evaluation petitions. It was brought to my attention, and I read a story, a report rather, through, let me see what agency it is. This came through the Associated Press, um, through the Heckinger report. You can pull it up and read it yourself if you choose to. But the title really disturbs me. Okay, the opening. And it says, schools are sending more kids to the hospital. Last year, children were handcuffed and sent to a hospital emergency room for a psychiatric evaluation at least 117 times from schools in Wicomico County on Maryland's Eastern Shore. And for those of you who are in the audience and those who support A Mother's Cry that will be watching, Wicomico County is the county that I live in here on Maryland's Eastern Shore. So when I read this, I was really perturbed, and I'm still quite upset about it. The article goes on to say, the report goes on to say, 3 times a week, on average, a police car pulls up to a school in Wicomico County on Maryland's Eastern Shore. A student is brought out, handcuffed, and placed inside for transport to a hospital emergency room for a psychiatric evaluation. Over the past 8 years, the process has been used at least 750 times on students, some as young as 5 years old. The state law that allows for these removals, known as petitions for emergency evaluation, is meant to be limited to people with severe mental illness who are endangering their own lives or safety for someone else's life. It is the first step toward getting someone involuntarily committed to a psychiatric hospital. The report goes on to say, but advocates say schools across the country are sending the children to emergency room for psychiatric evaluations in response to behaviors sometimes prompted by bullying or frustration over assignments. The ER trips, they say, often follow months and sometimes years of their needs not being met. Black students are more frequently subjected to these removals than their peers, according to available data. Advocates point to students with disabilities also being removed at higher rates. At least 40% of the students that were removed from schools in Wicomico County via handcuffs, cuffs in the back of a police car were 12 or younger. More than half were Black children, even though a little more than a third of Wicomico public school children are Black. Now, let's just sit right there for a minute. In interviews, dozens of students, parents, educators, lawyers, and advocates for students with disability in Wicomico County said a lack of resources and trained staff combined with a punitive culture in schools are behind the misuse of emergency petitions. Let me break that down for you. Wicomico County is not prepared with the proper resources to handle a child that is having some sort of an outbreak for whatever reason. Most of the time, it is an accumulation of personal issues that have not been addressed and issues that have often been brought to the attention of the school, but still were not addressed. And the punitive culture in some schools, not just in schools in Wicomico County, but there's a punitive culture all over this county, where it's the first thought is to lock them up, put them in handcuffs, lock them up. Let's not address the issue that brought them to this place of frustration where they acted out. Let's just lock them up. We see that not just in our schools, but on our streets as well. Okay. The report goes on to say that there was a Wicomico County mom who asked for her name not to be given because she fears retaliation from the school. And she recalled the terror that she felt when her son's school called and said they were going to have him assessed for a forced psychiatric hospitalization. When she arrived at the school, she said her son was already in handcuffs. He was put in the back of a police car and taken to the hospital. She said he was just sitting there in handcuffs, saying that the handcuffs were hurting his wrist, and he didn't understand why he was in the hospital. This practice does not just happen in Wicomico County. The report shows it happening all across the country. But the fact that Wicomico County, excuse me, is highlighted through the Associated Press is very indicative of a major problem here in this county. While the Wicomico County Council is taking money away from the school system and deducing what the county will give to the Board of Education, maybe they stop taking money, then they can have some resources to help address these issues that these children are having. It does say in this report that it is not just here in Maryland or on the Eastern Shore or in Wicomico County. It does say in Maryland, I want you to hear this, in the state of Maryland, Wicomico County uses emergency petitions more often per capita than almost every other Maryland district where data is available. So those of you who want to keep saying that there is no discriminatory actions in Wicomico County, there's no racism in Wicomico County, there's no bigotry in Wicomico County, yeah, okay, keep telling yourself that. But those of us who know that there is, we need to speak out on these things, not just read it and shake our head and mumble and complain to ourselves. We need to speak out on these things. And this is my A.M.C response today to this particular issue. Wicomico parents describe struggling to get support for their children when they fell behind on basics like reading and math in early grades. These gaps in learning can lead to frustration and behaviors challenging for teachers to manage. So if the issue is not addressed at an early age, when you see the child is falling behind in reading and math and in basic skills that they need to learn by, then of course there are going to be issues further down the road. Because if I can't read properly, I can't do my schoolwork properly, then I'm going to be laughed at and mocked and bullied by my classmates. And then, of course, because I am a child and I don't necessarily have great communication skills, or I don't know how to resolve conflicts, I'm going to act out and lash out. That doesn't mean that my next step should be that I'm in handcuffs on my way to the psychiatric ward at the hospital. This really irritates me. The mother said that he was sent to the hospital after an outburst rooted in frustration, not mental illness. So whatever happened to having a assistant in the classroom, or some place where the student can go to express themselves, why they're upset, why they're angry, why they're frustrated, and de-escalate the situation, instead of calling the cops, putting the child in handcuffs, sending them to the hospital, treating them like a criminal, and then they already develop a negative. Then you don't understand why Black and brown people have issues with cops in general, not all cops, because they don't see you. They don't see them as people who really care about them. They just see them as people that are going to punish them when they're having a bad day. They're going to punish them when they're acting out because they don't have the verbal ability or the verbiage to express their frustration. That's pathetic. In Wicomico County, you need to do better. She also recalled one of the school officials telling her that he doesn't have special needs, he just has anger issues. Okay, so the school official is now a psychiatrist or a therapist. All right, so if you decide you've come to the conclusion that the child is just angry, do you take the time to find out why he's angry, or do you just say, I don't have time, I got too many other kids to worry about, I'll just send him to the hospital and let them deal with it? That's crazy. And then the mother said after that, her son went from being angry to being terrified, because now I'm in the back of a police car, I'm in handcuffs, I don't know what's going to happen to me. And they see the stories on the news about police officers brutalizing people that look like them. So now he's terrified. And every time, the mother says, every time he sees a police officer, he starts panicking. And there's no need for you to ask why. Emergency petitions are not supposed to be used for disciplinary purposes just because you don't have the time or the energy or the bandwidth to deal with and to dissect or de-escalate the situation. I remember when my son was in school and he had a medical issue, and there was documentation from a doctor, from a hospital, that said, explain what the issue was and how it needed to be dealt with. But every time he asked this particular teacher, could he go to the nurse or whatever the case may be, she kept saying no. So after a while, he finally told me. He didn't tell me when it first happened. He told me, after a few times of it happening, and him not being allowed to go handle what needs to be done. So I said to him, the next time you think you need to go have that taken care of, you just get up and go. And then you go straight to the office and call me. Don't even go back to the classroom. So anyway, it turns into this big thing where the teacher's like, threatening to put him out of class and blah, blah, blah. So you know me. So I set up a meeting with the teacher and the then assistant principal. And so In the meeting, there's a whole bunch of stuff going back and forth, back and forth. And so finally, the teacher says to me, to my face, and in front of the administrator and my son, she said these exact words. Well, to be honest with you, I really just don't like Trevante. That's what the teacher who's getting paid to teach my child said. I really just do not like Trevante. And my response was, well, he doesn't like you either. And after just being in this room with you for a few minutes, I don't like you. But we don't have to like each other. But each one of us has to respect each other in our respective positions to give the respect that we want to be given back to us. So I proceeded to go back through, what the problem was. So the administrator's like, well, maybe she never got the notice that the doctor, that is not my problem. So I made sure that I gave the documentation to who needed to be given to. It's the school's responsibility to give it to whoever else they want to give it to. I don't care if they want to give it to the janitor. That's not my responsibility to make sure the janitor had it. So I said, but here's the issue. When I told him to get up and walk out, you wanted to suspend him for leaving the room. And that's the reason why we're here right now. But nothing was said about the teacher not allowing him to go after 2 or 3 times of saying, I need to go to the nurse. So if he had been one of those children, or if he had been in that point in his life where it was so much going on and he got really angry and he got up and walked out, or he, lashed out at her, whatever, and then next thing you know, not only is he suspended, but would you have called the police on him for the psychiatric evaluation also? So this is my point. I said to somebody when I used to work in the school system, and I would be standing at the door, in the elementary school and the primary schools, you're standing out there and you're waiting for the kids to come in from the bus, and different children would get off the bus. And as they're walking up to the door, I would hear some of the other teachers say, oh boy, here comes so-and-so, he's trouble. Or we look forward to him getting in trouble today, or something like that. And I remember turning to a couple of teachers that were standing there, and I said these words: you do realize that when they come here to this school, they're coming from somewhere. I mean, they didn't just drop out the sky. They're coming from somewhere. Does anybody ever take the time to think, maybe this child is acting up today because, one, he's hungry, maybe he didn't have food at home, maybe there's some issues going on in the house, abuse, or maybe there's family trauma that is affecting this child and he doesn't know how to respond to it? Or you just automatically want to label them and assume that they're just choosing to act the way that they're acting? And then the sad thing about it is, once that child gets that label, once you decide that you need to call the cops on my child and have him put in handcuffs and put in the back of a police car and taken to the hospital for psychiatric evaluation because he's frustrated because he can't read well, once he gets that label, it's a part of his record. And every grade that he goes to, that information goes with him. I am greatly disturbed by what I'm hearing. The fact that it is like, that it is so bad that it is recognized nationwide. Wicomico County School District, you should be ashamed. Yes, that's what I said. You should be ashamed, and you need to do better. And parents, grandparents, so-called social advocates, so-called community activists, we need to address this issue. not just during election time, not just be seen when your name is out there. We need to address this issue. Our children's lives and futures are at stake. That is my A.M.C response to this particular issue. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you again soon.